Have you ever stood in your own family's living room and felt like a stranger? Not because you did anything wrong, but because no matter how hard you tried, how quiet, how polite, how small you made yourself, it was never going to be enough to be seen. If that hit too close, don't scroll. This isn't just another wedding drama. This is what happens when the people who should protect you decide you're a threat instead. I'm Lena Merrick, and growing up in Northern Virginia, I thought families had favourites like schools had valedictorians, unspoken but obvious. Mine wasn't unspoken, it was blaringly clear. My sister Daria was the daughter my parents presented like a trophy at every holiday dinner. Ballet photos framed in gold, piano recitals that they live-streamed to relatives in Connecticut. She got a $6,000 Sweet 16 with a candy bar, string lights, a rented photo booth, and a live acoustic band. I got a cupcake and a job handing out the napkins, literally. My mother asked me to help coordinate the drinks during Daria's party. I was 16. I wore black because I didn't own anything pastel. My name wasn't on the invite, but I swallowed it, like always. When I got straight A's, my dad said, Daria got hers too. When I won a county writing award, my mum said, don't post about it, sweetie. Daria's college app didn't make the finalist round. Let's not stir anything. When I made prom court senior year, me, in a $35 dress from a thrift store, they told me to skip the ceremony and not make Daria feel bad. So I did what they seemed to want. I disappeared. At 19, I moved out, worked 2 jobs, morning shifts at a bagel cafe, evening hours folding clothes at a boutique. No help, no checks, no we miss you. I thought maybe I'd get a birthday text. I didn't. But I also didn't hate them. That's the twist. I kept sending holiday cards. I answered calls from Daria when she needed graphic design tips or a quick caption suggestion. I was the backup daughter, quiet, reliable, disposable. And then the wedding invitation came. It wasn't even mailed. Daria texted me a Canva screenshot with the caption, formal invite to follow, but can you do a toast at the brunch? Parents said you'd be perfect. Perfect. Not pretty, not honoured. Perfect. Like a placeholder in a lineup. But I said yes, because some deep, aching part of me thought, maybe. Maybe if I dressed right, spoke clearly, didn't take up too much space, maybe this time I'd finally be allowed to stand with the family, not behind them. So I saved. I worked every Sunday at a sushi place across from the metro. Tip money went into a mason jar labelled navy silk. That was the dress I wanted. Not flashy, not loud, just elegant. It cost £189.99 on clearance at Bloomingdale's. When it finally arrived, I zipped it up in my tiny apartment bathroom and whispered, "You did this yourself. No help, no Daria, no mom, just me." I also practice public speaking on YouTube, Toastmasters clips, TED Talks on storytelling. I wrote my toast in a marble notebook and timed it to under 3 minutes. No jokes, no drama, just heart. 2 days before the wedding, Mum called. "You should stay over Thursday night. We'll have tea, relax. Hannah's going crazy with the seating chart. It'd be good to have you home, just like old times." I should have known home wasn't about me. It was about control, but I wanted to believe. I still had that pathetic hope that maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment everything shifted. One wedding, one toast, one real family photo where I wasn't cropped out or handed the camera. That's how these revenge stories begin, right? With someone who didn't want revenge at all, someone who just wanted to be seen. I packed my dress, my handwritten speech, a tiny bottle of lavender body spray, and took the commuter train out of DC. I stopped by a local bakery near Union Station, bought an almond cake with chocolate lettering that read, "To Family," and carried it like a gift. But my mother looked at it and said, "Too sweet. Daria's watching her sugar. I'll toss it." She didn't even open the box. That night, they gave me a cup of tea, chamomile, she said. "Helps with nerves." Dad chuckled from the living room. "You'll look great in that dress. Just don't overshadow the bride." I smiled, nervously, still trying to please. I went to bed replaying my speech in my head. I didn't know that would be the last time I'd feel like I belonged there, not because they'd finally embrace me, but because the next morning I'd wake up locked in a room with blood on my pillow and scissors on the floor. At first, I didn't realise anything was wrong. I blinked into the morning light, a little groggy from the tea, and thought, must have slept hard. My head felt light, empty, almost. And then the scent hit me, metallic, bitter, familiar, scissors. I sat up, slowly. The world tilted for a second. My hair, my chestnut hair I'd grown out for 2 years, layered just right for the navy silk neckline, wasn't brushing my shoulders. It wasn't brushing anything. My neck felt exposed, cold. I stumbled to the dresser mirror, but it was gone. Gone. Like they'd removed it. Instead, taped to the wood was a yellow sticky note, in my mother's handwriting. "You'll still look fine. Focus on your speech. Let Hannah shine." I remember reading it once, then again, hoping maybe I was misreading, maybe it was a joke. Then I looked down, clumps of hair on the floor, on my pillow, on my hoodie. Some of it still stuck to the back of my neck, wet, red. That's when I reached up and touched the source. My scalp was bleeding. The cut wasn't deep, but it was raw, uneven, like someone had yanked and hacked, not trimmed. I looked at my hands. They were shaking. No hairbrush, no blow dryer, nothing in the drawers. Even my travel pouch with the mini straightener, gone. I ran to the door, locked, from the outside. Not kidding, not exaggerated. They had locked me in. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't someone being careless. This was deliberate. I had been drugged. I had been cut. I had been contained by my own parents. Let me ask you something, and be honest. Have you ever woken up and realised the people you loved weren't just flawed, but dangerous? I don't mean with fists or screams. I mean the kind of danger that whispers in your tea, tiptoes into your room, and slices parts of you while you sleep. The kind that smiles the next morning and says, "Breakfast is ready," because that's exactly what happened. They unlocked the door. An hour later, my dad was chewing toast. My mum was stirring her coffee. I walked into the kitchen barefoot, hair falling in jagged layers over one eye. I hadn't even seen the full damage yet, but I could feel it. My dad glanced up from his phone. "Oh, you're up. Good." My mom sipped from her mug. "You'll want to wash your face, sweetie. You look a little intense." I didn't say a word. I just stared at them, at their calm, their casual cruelty. My dad folded his newspaper like we were in some 1950s sitcom. Less hair makes your face less distracting anyway. You don't want to pull focus from Hannah. Less distracting. Like I was a decorative object. Like my existence was a threat to the family aesthetic. My mum added, "It's Hannah's big day, Lena. Don't make this about you." As if they hadn't already done exactly that. It's funny. In those moments, your brain doesn't scream. It goes silent, like it's watching a slow car crash, and you can't move, can't speak, can't feel. But then I glanced down at my arm. The inside of my wrist was faintly stained with tea. The mug I drank the night before had a tiny lip print still there on the counter. They had planned this, carefully, methodically, as if I was a problem to be managed, not a daughter to be loved. I walked back to the guest room, locked the door from my side this time, sat on the floor among the hair and the silence. Then I picked up my phone and texted Becca, "Me, they did it, me, they actually did it. Me, can you come?" She was there in 20 minutes. She didn't knock. She just walked in, took one look at me and gasped, "Oh my God, Lena." I nodded, just once. Couldn't speak, couldn't cry. I was too empty for that. Becca walked over, crouched, picked up a piece of my hair from the floor like it was a crime scene. Then she looked me straight in the eyes and asked, "They did this to you on purpose?" I nodded again. She didn't say anything for a few seconds, just sat there with me, then pulled out her phone and said, Okay, we're not going to the wedding like this. We're doing something better. And listen, I know some people might think this is dramatic, that it's just hair, just one night, just a family thing. But if you've ever been made to feel like your presence was a mistake, if you've ever been told to shrink so someone else could shine, tell me, right now, what would you have done? Because that's where my story changes. That's where I changed. Becca didn't ask me to explain. She didn't try to fix it with hugs or throwaway lines like, maybe it was a misunderstanding. She just stood there in my old childhood bedroom, hair everywhere, the sticky note still taped to the dresser, and said the words that changed everything. They didn't cut your hair, Lena. They tried to cut you out. That's when the tears started. Not dramatic sobs. Just quiet, hot drops I couldn't stop. Because she was right. They hadn't just ruined a hairstyle. They had tried to erase me again. We sat on the floor, our backs against the door, the same door they had locked the night before. I don't want revenge, I whispered. I just want distance, space, to never come back here again. Becca was quiet for a moment, then reached into her backpack. You still record those little voice memos for therapy? I blinked at her. Yeah, why? She held up my phone. You told me you saved them. Do you still have the one from a few weeks ago? The night your mum got mad about that photo? My stomach turned. She meant the night I posted a picture from a friend's bridal shower. I wore a sundress and heels, hair down, minimal makeup. I thought I looked nice, like someone who belonged somewhere. 2 hours later, Mum called. That photo's a little much, don't you think? We don't want you outshining your sister, especially this close to the wedding. At the time, I recorded it. I didn't know why, just habit. Something my therapist suggested, track patterns, document what feels off, not for proof, just for processing. Becca found the file, played it, we listened. And then we found another one, Dad talking to someone, maybe a cousin, saying, pretty girls ruin weddings, especially when they want attention. Lena's not built for the spotlight anyway. Best to keep things simple. I'd forgotten I had saved that one too. There were more, small moments, comments that chipped away at who I was, year after year, one after another, like dull knives carving at my identity. And as we listened, I stopped crying, I stopped shaking. Something in me clicked. This wasn't just one night of cruelty, this was a system. You know, Becca said slowly, there's a way to make them listen. I looked at her. Like what? I'm not trying to blow up their wedding. Not their wedding, she said, the lie it's built on. That night, we drove back to my apartment in DC. Becca evened out my hair into a clean, edgy bob. You look like someone who's about to expose a family, she joked, trying to lighten the mood. I didn't laugh, because it wasn't funny, it was personal. I stayed up all night listening to those recordings again, not to wallow, to understand. Every word, every dig, every carefully veiled insult, they weren't random. They were part of a pattern I had ignored for years because I wanted love more than truth, but I couldn't afford that anymore. By morning I had a plan. The rehearsal brunch was set for noon at the Vineyard. Meadowood, Napa Valley, $110,000 wedding package. Very photogenic, very performative. The guest list included extended relatives, family friends, Daria's old piano teacher, and one woman who once babysat us in 1999. All there, all dressed in creams and pastels. I wore black. Not out of spite, out of intention. Black is clarity. Black doesn't ask permission to be seen. I arrived early, walked into the tent like I wasn't a guest, but a speaker with something to say. The mic sat at the centre of a small platform prepped for sweet sisterly tributes. The planner smiled at me like, "Oh, perfect, you're the older sister, right?" I just nodded. Not for her, for me, because I was the older sister. And this was the last time they would treat me like background noise. When the time came, I stood up, took the mic. Hi, I'm Lena Merrick. Some of you might know me as the quiet one, the one who moved away, the one who works somewhere creative, I guess. People chuckled politely. My mother froze, coffee cup halfway to her lips. My dad shifted in his seat. I continued. I know I'm not the favourite. That's never been a secret. But I showed up today with something different in mind, not a speech about sisterhood, a truth about family. The tent went still. Last night I was drugged, with tea they poured for me, locked in a room I once called my own, and I woke up to find my hair had been cut off, jagged, bloody, gone, on purpose. Gasps. Someone dropped a fork. Why? Because I might be visible in a photo, because I might accidentally draw attention. And then I pulled out my phone, played the recording, my mother's voice, crisp, cold. She thinks she'll look better than Daria. We'll fix that. My father's laugh. Cut it while she sleeps. Girls like her need reminders. The air collapsed into silence, and for the first time in my life, everyone heard them the way I always had, not as my parents, but as people who had made cruelty look like care. I stepped down, left the mic on the table, and walked out into the sun. The wedding wasn't ruined. The story was just beginning. I didn't cry when I left the tent, not when my mother's face twisted into that tight, sharp-edged smile she used to wear when I embarrassed the family by speaking too loudly in restaurants. Not when my father's voice barked out behind me, "That's enough, Lena." Not even when Daria burst into tears, real or fake, I honestly couldn't tell anymore, and screamed, "This will ruin my wedding photos." Because I wasn't there for their comfort anymore. I had already lost everything they were willing to take from me, and yet, walking out of that brunch, felt clean, like shedding a snakeskin, one I didn't even realize I'd been dragging behind me my entire life. Becca was waiting outside by the parking lot, leaning against her beat-up Civic with the AC blasting. She looked at me, raised one eyebrow and said, "So, how'd it go?" I handed her the mic, still warm from my hand. "Let's just say, they'll never ask me to give a toast again." She grinned. Good. What happened next moved faster than I expected. That night, Becca uploaded the full clip. She titled it simply, "This is what happens when your family thinks silence equals loyalty." No clickbait, no over-editing, just a raw, uncut video of a girl telling the truth in front of a room full of people trained to pretend. And somehow, it hit a nerve. By morning, it had over 300,000 views. By afternoon, it had 1 million. People weren't just watching, they were commenting, stitching it, reposting, sharing their own versions of being erased, dimmed, drugged, shamed. Someone messaged me on Instagram, "Your voice cracked exactly when mine used to. I've never heard someone say it out loud like that. Thank you." Someone else wrote, "I don't have a sister, but I had a mum who told me I should hide when guests came over. I get it. I see you." And then the hashtags started trending. #let her speak, #you can't cut power, the erased daughters. The press reached out next. A local journalist from a women's column, then a reporter from BuzzFeed, then NBC's digital segment. And in between them all, an email with a subject line that made me stare in disbelief. Creative Director Offer, Cynthia Ray, Renova Fashion Group. I read it 4 times before I let myself believe it was real. Cynthia Ray, the CEO of a high-end fashion label that specialised in storytelling-driven campaigns, had seen the video. She wrote, "Lena, your courage is not just admirable, it's market-shifting. We're building a new series centred around women who were silenced, edited or erased. We'd like you to lead it." 2 weeks later, I was in New York, not visiting, not pretending, working. Renova launched the campaign under the name Uncut, the Girls They Tried to Erase. I was the face, yes. But I wasn't just posing. I wrote the copy. I designed the visual themes. I gave interviews in sleek, all-black outfits with nothing soft about them. The billboard in Times Square didn't just show my image. It had a quote pulled directly from that brunch speech. "You taught me shame. Now I teach you consequence. And let me tell you, nothing is louder than a girl who was never supposed to speak, finally being heard. But the real silence came from back home. My parents didn't call, not to explain, not to apologise. They did, however, post a photo from the wedding day with the caption, "Grateful for family, grateful for peace." Comments under it were brutal. People recognised them from the video. Some said nothing, others said plenty. Daria's new husband, Greg? He stayed silent during the brunch, but 6 weeks later he quietly moved out. I know because someone messaged me, an old classmate who worked at the same gym Greg used. He said something about finding a shoebox filled with fake Instagram accounts his wife used, all attacking you anonymously. Apparently Daria hadn't just watched the video go viral. She'd been actively trying to push back, hide, deflect, attack from the shadows. Greg left the house and didn't look back. I didn't smile when I heard it. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt nothing, because I didn't need her to fall. I just needed to stop shrinking. Sometimes people ask me if I regret making the video public. If it was too much, too raw, too loud. I get it, especially if you grew up in a house where emotions were considered weapons and silence was survival. But here's the truth. What they did to me wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a message. You are too much. You are not wanted. Stay small. And that message, I returned it, louder, sharper, uncut. There's this moment when you go viral, not just a lot of views viral, but cultural shift viral, when the comments stop being about you and start being about everyone else. Strangers from everywhere, different backgrounds, different countries, different ages, all with the same story dressed in different details. My mom didn't drug me, but she once shredded the dress I made for homecoming because it showed too much skin. I wasn't cut in my sleep, but my brother locked me in my room so his friends wouldn't see the weird sibling. I never spoke at a wedding, but I sat at one, invisible, while everyone clapped for a cousin who once told me I didn't belong. The DMs kept coming, thousands, and I tried to read every single one, because for the first time in my life I wasn't alone in what I had felt, and the more people listened, the more platforms reached out. Talk shows, podcasts, online panels on family estrangement, sibling favoritism, emotional abuse masked as tradition. People weren't just talking about me, they were talking about something bigger. What happens when a family pretends one child doesn't exist until she makes it impossible to ignore her? 3 weeks after the video hit 10 million views, I was flown out to New York for the first time in my life. I didn't sit in the back row of some off-brand interview. I sat at a long marble table in the corner office of Renova, across from Cynthia Ray herself, one of the most respected women in fashion and brand storytelling. She looked at me with a kind of calm confidence and said, "We don't want to put your face on a shirt. We want you to run this." I blinked. Run what? A new division, a campaign built around truth, around the girls like you, like me, honestly, who were made to feel small in their own homes. You'd be the creative director. You tell the story, you set the tone, and we back you. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or ask if she had the wrong person, but Cynthia smiled like she saw through me and said, "I saw your speech, I saw your eyes. You weren't angry, you were done. That's the kind of voice the world listens to now." So I said yes, and just like that, I became the face and voice of the Uncut campaign. Uncut, the girls they tried to erase. We didn't use soft tones or florals, we used bold fonts, dark backdrops, unapologetic angles. No one in our campaign smiled for the camera. Not because we were bitter, but because our stories weren't built on comfort. They were built on surviving silence. I was flown to LA for the launch shoot, wore an Alexander McQueen blazer over a custom jumpsuit stitched with one of my own quotes inside the lining. "Some daughters are born loud, others get louder over time." The first billboard went up in Times Square. It wasn't me in a dress. It was me in that bob haircut Becca had evened out with kitchen scissors. A black backdrop, One eye slightly shadowed, raw, direct. The quote beside me, "You taught me shame, now I teach you consequence." And beneath that, hat uncut, Renova, Lena Merrick, creative director. I didn't need to go viral again. I had gone visible. And then came the part I never expected. Cynthia called me into her office one morning. She looked serious. "We're opening our first East Coast branch." "Okay," I said slowly, waiting. "In Alexandria." I froze. "Virginia?" "Yep, right in the historic district, 2 blocks from where you used to live. I want you to run it." I stared at her. "Is that a joke?" She shook her head. "No, it's a power move. You don't have to say yes, but think about what it means." I said yes, not for revenge, for reclamation. When we launched, the building had wide glass windows, clean concrete floors, and a decal on the front entrance that read, "You can't cut power." People walked by slowly. Some recognized me, some stared, some walked in just to say thank you. And among them, eventually, were my parents. They didn't email, didn't call, they just showed up. My mother wore oversized sunglasses indoors. My father looked thinner, older, like time had pressed against him harder in the past few months. They didn't recognize me at first. I wasn't the girl with long hair and soft shoulders anymore. I was the woman standing in front of a team, giving notes on color palettes and campaign themes. When my mum finally spoke, her voice was small. "We're proud of you." I looked at her for a moment. "Since when?" She opened her mouth, but I cut in. "Since the internet noticed me? Since Cynthia hired me? Since the world said, 'We hear her'? Because you didn't. Not when I needed it. Not when I was bleeding in that bedroom. Not when I begged to be seen." My dad chuckled awkwardly. "Families heal, right? We all make mistakes." I walked to the reception desk and gestured toward the comment cards we'd set out for customers. "Would you like to leave feedback?" They blinked. "We take every voice seriously here," I added, stepping back toward the team, still waiting on me. They stood still, out of place, out of power. And when they finally turned to leave, I called after them, not loud, just clear. "Scissors dull, but some girls sharpen." The day we opened the Alexandria branch of Renova, it rained. Not hard, just enough to make the sidewalk shimmer, just enough to make the air feel heavy, like it remembered things too. I stood behind the new reception desk, watching people filter in, reporters, young artists, local activists, even a group of college students holding iced lattes and curiosity. The space was everything I had imagined: tall windows, sun-washed walls, minimalist art. The decal on the front door read, "You can't cut power." It wasn't just branding, it was a warning, a promise, a homecoming. And then they walked in, my parents. They didn't announce themselves, didn't RSVP. They just showed up, like this was their right, like this was a church they helped build. My mother was wearing oversized sunglasses indoors, again. My father stood a step behind her, looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in 6 months. They paused just inside the entrance, scanning the room. I didn't move. Neither did they. Eventually, I broke the silence. "There's a sign-in table near the back." My mother gave a little smile. Like we were at brunch. Like nothing had happened. "We saw the article, the photos. It's very impressive, Lena." I didn't reply. "We wanted to say congratulations," she added, "in person." My dad nodded along, looking for the right thing to say and missing it entirely. "We're proud of you," he said finally. I looked at them, really looked, and for the first time I didn't feel the old ache, that pull in my chest that begged to hear those words, that hoped they might mean something this time. They didn't, not anymore. "You're proud of what I've built," I said, "but you tried to destroy the girl who built it." They blinked. My mom opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the space. "You locked me in a room, you drugged me, you cut my hair while I slept, and you left me bleeding with a sticky note instead of love." "We made mistakes," my dad said quickly, his voice pinched. "No, you made decisions, over and over again. And now you want to step into this room like you belong in it, but you don't. You gave that up the night you chose silence over me. My mum's voice dropped to a whisper. Can't we talk privately? I shook my head. That's how you did it last time. Quietly, in the dark, behind closed doors. I stepped aside and gestured toward the suggestion box by the front window. You can leave a comment card if you'd like. We take feedback seriously here. They didn't move, just stood there, small, in a space that once would have intimidated me but now belonged to me. And I watched them realize it, that they couldn't rewrite the past, that I wasn't waiting anymore. You know, I added as they turned to leave, scissors dull, but some girls sharpen. They never came back. Not once. Not for the anniversary event, not for the awards night. And I never needed them to, because the point was never to hurt them. It was to finally stop hurting for them. 3 months later, I gave a TEDx talk. I stood in front of a red circle on a stage in Boston, under a spotlight, wearing the same black jumpsuit from our campaign shoot, and I said, "There's a certain pain that comes from being rejected by strangers. But there's a deeper one, from being rejected by people who are supposed to love you no matter what." I used to think silence was survival, that if I just kept my head down one day someone would look up and see me. But the truth is, some families aren't broken. They're functioning exactly as designed, to protect the shiny one and dim the rest. But dimmed doesn't mean extinguished, and survival isn't the goal. Visibility is, voice is, power is. The room went silent, and then the applause started, not because it was a great performance, but because they recognized it. These days I still get messages, some from girls halfway across the world, some from women in their 60s, some from men who watched their sisters go through the same. They all say some version of the same thing. Thank you. I didn't know I was allowed to say it out loud, and that's what this has become. Not revenge, not closure, but permission to tell the truth, to stop begging for love that costs your self-worth, to walk out even if the door is made of blood and guilt. If you've ever felt like your family wanted you small, invisible, manageable, but you refuse to disappear, tell me your story, or just type, "I'm still here," because sometimes just saying that, just being here, is already a kind of power no one can take from you.